Okay, so today we're diving into brand positioning.
All right.
I mean, it's something we think about all the time as consumers, right? Like,
Yeah.
why does this brand stick in my mind more than another one?
Right.
What feelings am I supposed to be getting from them?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
how does a company even go about crafting that whole image?
Exactly.
It,
Yeah, it's a really deliberate process.
and it's something that I think we take for granted
Yeah,
sometimes. We
absolutely.
just kind of absorb it all.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's what we're going to try to break down today. And we've got a really interesting mix of sources to work with.
Yeah, we do.
It's not just like marketing 101.
Right.
You know, we've got some stuff about consumer behavior, which is always fascinating to me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
We've got some very specific things about how brands are visually designed,
Mm.
like logos and names and stuff like that.
Yeah, the whole visual identity.
And even how this all works in different countries.
Yeah, international marketing that adds a whole other layer of complexity.
So it's a pretty broad deep dive.
Yeah, it is.
But hopefully we can connect all the dots.
Absolutely.
So just to kind of set the stage right, what is brand positioning at its core?
Yeah, so basically it's all about a company trying to carve out a unique space in the minds of their target customers.
Okay.
You know, it's more than just being known. It's about creating a very specific perception
Right.
that makes the brand stand out from the competition and hopefully influences customers to choose them.
So it's not just about being present, it's about being present in a certain way.
Exactly. That's strategic.
Okay, so how does that actually work then?
Well, one of the sources actually defines it pretty well.
Okay.
They say brand positioning is designing the company's offering and image to occupy a distinctive and valued place in the target customer's minds.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what we were just saying.
Right.
But it's interesting that they specifically say valued place.
Yeah, that's a key word.
So it's not just about being different for the sake of being different.
No, it has to be a difference that matters to the customer. A difference that gives them a reason to choose that brand.
And this whole positioning thing isn't just some abstract idea. It actually guides the entire marketing strategy.
Yeah.
Like it's the foundation everything else is built upon.
Exactly. It's the roadmap.
Okay.
It clarifies what the brand represents, what sets it apart from the competition, and why customers should buy and use it.
So it's pretty much the starting point.
Absolutely.
Now, we've talked about how companies want to be seen, but what about us?
The consumers.
Yeah, like how do we as consumers fit into all of this?
One thing to consider is that over time, we develop expectations about brands.
Okay.
We build up this mental history with them based on our experiences and what we've heard.
That's true. I mean, you kind of start to expect certain things from certain brands.
Exactly.
Like if you've always had a good experience with a particular brand of electronics,
Mhm.
you're more likely to trust them when they come out with a new gadget.
Yeah, you're giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Right, exactly. And one source specifically mentions brand extensions.
Oh, yeah. Like when a company leverages its existing reputation to launch something new.
Yeah, like when a company known for making great cameras suddenly starts selling TVs.
Mm-hmm.
They're hoping that the trust people have in their cameras will carry over to their TVs.
And it often does.
Yeah.
Especially if they do a good job of positioning that new product.
Right.
Now, another thing that shapes our perceptions of brands is the whole idea of subcultures.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating area.
I mean, those smaller groups within a larger society that have their own values and norms and things like that.
Exactly.
And marketers really need to be aware of these because what works for one group might not work at all for another.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, think about something like fashion.
Right.
What's considered cool or trendy in one subculture might be completely out of place in another.
Yeah, subcultures can be based on all sorts of things, too.
Like what?
Age,
Okay.
gender identity, ethnicity, hobbies,
Music.
music. Yeah, exactly.
Location.
Yeah, it can be almost anything that brings people together. And each of these groups can have their own unique set of values and preferences.
And those preferences definitely influence what they buy.
So marketers really need to do their homework
For sure.
to figure out who they're trying to reach and what matters to them.
It's all about understanding your target audience.
All right, so we've talked about how companies want to be seen. And we've talked about how subcultures can influence our perceptions.
Yeah.
Now, what about the actual process of buying something?
Right.
One of our sources breaks it down into 3 basic steps.
Okay.
First, we realize we have a need.
Okay.
Then we search for information before buying. And finally, we make the purchase.
Sounds about right.
But it's during that decision phase that things get really interesting.
Yeah, because there's a whole lot of mental processing going on.
Right.
Whether we're consciously aware of it or not.
One source mentions that our entire psychological system gets involved.
Oh, wow.
They break it down into our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions.
Interesting.
So it's not just a purely rational process.
No, definitely not.
Our emotions definitely play a role.
For sure. I mean, think about a time when you bought something impulsively.
Oh, yeah. All the time.
You probably weren't thinking too logically about it.
Definitely not.
You were driven by your emotions in that moment.
And one source even mentions post-purchase dissonance.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
That feeling of doubt you might get after making a big purchase.
Yeah, like buyer's remorse.
Exactly.
And it happens because we're constantly being bombarded with information and options.
Right.
It's easy to second-guess yourself.
Especially with those big decisions.
Yeah, like buying a car or a house.
You always wonder if you made the right choice.
Right.
So how can companies help minimize that feeling?
Well, one thing they can do is provide really good customer support.
Okay.
Make sure their customers feel confident and happy with their purchase.
So it's not just about closing the sale.
No, it's about building a lasting relationship.
That makes sense.
And they can also try to manage expectations beforehand by being transparent about the product's features and limitations so that customers know what they're getting into.
Now, you mentioned that our emotions play a role in decision-making, but we're not always just driven by emotion.
Right.
Sometimes we actually do put on our thinking caps.
We try to be rational.
And one of our sources presents this view of the consumer as a problem solver.
Okay.
Someone who actively seeks out information to fulfill their needs.
I like that.
Yeah, it makes us sound a little more intelligent.
A little more in control.
Right. And they explain that we process information to form preferences and make decisions.
Okay.
But we don't try to find every single piece of information out there.
That would be overwhelming.
Right. We stop once we feel like we have enough to make a decent choice.
It's about finding a balance between effort and satisfaction.
Exactly.
We're not looking for perfection, just a good enough solution.
And to make things easier, we often use mental shortcuts.
Heuristics.
Yeah, like rules of thumb that help us simplify decision-making.
Especially when we're pressed for time or facing too many options.
Right, like if you're in a hurry and need to buy a bottle of ketchup.
You might just grab the brand you recognize.
Exactly.
Or the one that's on sale.
So we're not always doing this deep analysis.
No, sometimes we just rely on those mental shortcuts.
Now, one thing that really surprised me
What's that?
is that people with lower literacy skills might approach these decisions in a different way.
Oh, interesting.
One source points out that they often rely on concrete reasoning and focus on just one or two key pieces of information.
So they're not necessarily looking at the big picture.
Right. And they also tend to rely heavily on brand recognition through logos.
Ah, so those visual cues become even more important.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that not everyone processes information in the same way.
And that marketers need to consider those differences.
Absolutely.
Now, another trend we see in the business world is this focus on social responsibility.
Yeah, it's not just about making a profit anymore.
Right. Companies are starting to care more about things like social causes and the environment.
Which is a good thing.
Definitely.
And consumers are starting to expect it too.
Right. They want to support companies that align with their values.
Exactly.
So it's becoming a more important part of brand positioning.
Absolutely.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the visual side of branding.
The design aspect.
Yeah, like how do companies create a visual identity that communicates the right message?
Right.
One source emphasizes that brand design is about more than just aesthetics.
Yeah, it's about creating a system of visual cues that work together to convey the brand's essence.
Okay.
It's about organizing content for information, persuasion, and visual appeal.
So it's a very deliberate process.
Absolutely.
And one thing they delve into is different types of brand names.
Oh, yeah.
Like metaphorical names, which indirectly suggest certain qualities through their meaning.
Yeah, like using the name Stallion for a car to evoke power and speed.
Exactly.
And then you have existing or found names.
Like what? Like Apple for computers.
Right.
There's no inherent connection between apples and computers.
But they've built that association over time.
Exactly.
And then there's the use of symbols.
Yeah, those can be really powerful.
Like Nike swoosh.
Everyone knows what that means.
Exactly.
It's instantly recognizable.
And some symbols use this idea of metonymy.
What's that?
It's where one image represents something else based on a relationship like cause and effect or origin.
Oh.
Like using a crown to represent royalty.
I see.
Or a heart to represent love.
Big makes sense.
One source even walks us through an actual brand design process.
Oh, cool.
Using the example of the National Museum of Modern Art.
Interesting.
They started with a simple rectangle representing a painting,
Okay.
and then they went through all these different stages of refinement and exploration.
To arrive at the final logo.
Exactly.
That's really insightful to see how that process works.
And they also show sketches for a brand called Amica.
Yeah, it's interesting because they combined seemingly unrelated elements.
Like what?
Like a rabbit playing card suits and the letter A.
Huh. That's a strange mix.
Right, but they somehow managed to bring it all together to create a unique brand concept.
So it's about finding those unexpected connections
Exactly.
and layering meaning into the visual elements.
Now, to really understand how a brand is perceived, companies need to ask themselves some tough questions.
Like what?
Like, how do they want to be seen by their customers?
That's a good starting point.
One example they give is a company that wants to be known as a leader in excellent communication projects.
Okay.
And just as importantly, they need to understand why customers might choose them over the competition.
Right.
So in that example, the reason was that they offer real-world work experience to future professionals.
I see.
So it's about aligning your brand positioning with what customers value.
Makes sense.
But it's not always easy to figure that out.
No, it takes a lot of research and insight.
No, of course, all of this happens within a larger context. Yeah, and external factors can play a huge role.
Definitely.
One source mentions how something like economic instability can affect an entire industry.
Oh, for sure.
Like if people are worried about the economy, they might be less likely to spend money on certain things.
Right.
So companies need to be aware of these trends and adjust their strategies accordingly.
Yeah, they need to be adaptable.
And think about both the short term and the long term. Like
Okay.
in that communication company example,
Hmm.
their long-term vision might be to be known for their versatility
Okay.
so that they can weather any storm.
I like that.
Now, to help with brand development, some companies use tools like heuristic matrices.
What are those?
They basically help you systematically analyze different aspects of the brand,
Like what?
like symbolism attributes and visual concepts.
Interesting.
They gave an example with a company called Autonomedia,
Okay.
and they used this matrix to explore different branding possibilities.
So it's a way to make the process a little more structured and ensure that you're considering all the important elements.
Okay, so now let's step back even further and think about the broader role of marketing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more than just advertising.
Right.
One source emphasizes that it's both a business philosophy and a set of actions.
Interesting.
So it's about understanding what the market needs and being able to adapt to changes,
Right.
like changes in technology, the economy, competition.
Yeah, all of that.
And they point out that more and more industries are adopting this market-oriented approach.
It's becoming more essential
Absolutely.
because customers have more choices than ever before.
Right. And if you don't focus on their needs...
You're going to get left behind.
Exactly.
So marketing is all about understanding and meeting those needs.
Now, when it comes to actually competing in the market, companies can use different strategies.
Like what?
There are offensive strategies,
Right.
which are all about achieving growth.
As
By penetrating existing markets, expanding into new ones, or increasing their market share.
So it's about being proactive
Exactly.
and going after what you want.
And then there are defensive strategies,
Okay.
which are more about protecting your current position.
So it's about maintaining your market share.
Right. And maximizing profits without taking too many risks.
I think.
So it's a more conservative approach.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when a market starts to slow down?
That's a tough situation.
Right.
It could lead to intense competition.
And one of the things they mentioned is price competition,
Oh, yeah. The dreaded price wars.
where everyone starts lowering their prices to try to stay ahead.
But that's not always the best strategy.
Right. It can hurt everyone in the long run,
And it doesn't really address the underlying problem.
which is that the market is shrinking.
Exactly.
So what are some other things companies can do?
Well, they can focus on differentiating their products,
Okay.
like through quality, style, or new features.
So making them stand out.
Yeah. Giving customers a reason to choose them over the competition.
And they can also target new customer segments or try to gain a competitive advantage through things like better customer service or stronger branding.
So it's about finding ways to add value beyond just price.
Exactly.
Because in a slow market, price is only going to get you so far.
Now, it's interesting that they also talk about what makes a successful market follower,
Oh, yeah.
because not every company can be the leader.
Right.
And sometimes being a follower can be a good strategy.
If you do it right.
Exactly. And they point out that successful followers often have superior product quality,
Okay.
better pricing, invest more strategically in marketing, and make better use of their resources.
So they're not just copying the leader.
Yeah.
They're finding ways to improve upon what the leader is doing.
And carving out their own niche.
Exactly.
Now, all of this strategic thinking relies on really understanding the customer.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where market research comes in.
Right.
It's about gathering data and insights to understand customer behavior and preferences.
Okay.
Like what products they want, how much they're willing to pay, where they like to shop,
Right.
and what kind of messages resonate with them.
It's all about knowing your audience.
And there are different types of market research depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Like what?
They gave an example of how kosher products expanded from specialty stores to supermarkets
Okay.
because they realized there was a broader demand.
That makes sense.
So market research helped them identify that opportunity.
And make a strategic decision.
Exactly.
And they also emphasize the importance of exploratory research.
Which is?
It's like the initial step in any good market research project.
Okay.
It's about getting a broad overview of the landscape.
Before diving into specifics.
Exactly.
And when they want to understand general opinions, they use probing questions.
Okay.
Like in the example they gave with Yak Bingo.
Yak Bingo.
Yeah, it's a new way of playing bingo on TV.
Oh, interesting.
And they use these open-ended questions to really understand what people think about it.
So it's about getting more than just a yes or no answer.
Right. It's about understanding the why behind the response.
That's really valuable.
And finally, they touch on sampling techniques, which are used in quantitative research to make sure that the results are representative of a larger group of people.
So it's about making sure your data is reliable.
Exactly.
And that you can generalize your findings.
Now let's talk about the creative side of marketing.
Advertising.
Yeah. How do companies grab our attention and persuade us to buy their products?
It's a delicate balance.
Right. And our sources emphasize that creativity is key.
Yeah, you need to stand out from the noise.
And find new ways to connect with people.
Exactly.
It's about finding that spark of inspiration.
That makes people stop and pay attention.
And effective advertising has several key elements.
Like what?
First, you need to identify the unique selling proposition.
Okay.
Or a specific consumer need that your product addresses.
Right.
Then you need to find the most persuasive way to present that idea.
Okay.
Choose the right communication channels to reach your audience. And then measure the effectiveness of your campaign.
Both before and after it launches.
Exactly, because you need to know what's working and what's not.
Absolutely.
Now, once a company has attracted customers, they want to keep them coming back.
Right.
And that's where loyalty programs come in.
Yeah, those are everywhere these days.
They are, and one source describes them as a defensive strategy based on the idea that it's cheaper to retain existing customers than to acquire new ones.
That makes sense.
And these programs basically offer rewards based on purchase history and customer profile.
Okay.
To encourage repeat business and build loyalty.
It's like a way to say thank you for being a loyal customer.
Exactly.
And keep them coming back for more.
And these rewards can take many different forms.
And what?
There are savings-based rewards like discounts.
Okay.
Non-savings-based rewards like gifts or points.
Mm-hmm.
They can be tangible like money off or free products.
Right.
Or intangible like personalized service or recognition.
So there's a lot of variety.
And one thing they point out is that intangible rewards are becoming more and more valuable.
Why is that?
Because they're harder for competitors to copy.
Oh, I see.
Like you can always match a competitor's price.
Right.
But it's harder to replicate a unique customer experience.
Makes sense.
Now, some loyalty programs require a fee to join while others are free.
Okay.
And they can be simple or complex.
In terms of?
Like how you earn rewards and what the different tiers are.
Okay.
Card-based programs seem to be pretty popular.
Yeah, I've got a ton of those in my wallet.
Me too.
And they're good for both the customer and the company.
How so?
Well, for the customer, it's convenient to use, and they can easily track their rewards.
Right.
And for the company, it allows them to collect valuable data on customer behavior.
So it's a win-win.
Pretty much.
Now, when companies merge or are acquired, figuring out the value of a brand becomes a big deal.
Yeah, because it's an intangible asset.
And one source mentions 3 main methods for determining that value.
Sure.
The cost method.
Okay.
The market method. And the income method.
So different ways of looking at it.
Exactly.
And each method has its own pros and cons.
Right. The cost method basically looks at how much it would cost to recreate or replace the brand.
So like all the expenses that went into developing it and marketing it.
Exactly.
But that can be difficult to estimate.
Especially for older brands.
Yeah, and it doesn't really take into account future earnings.
So it's not a perfect measure.
No.
but it can be a useful starting point,
And they mentioned the market and income methods as alternatives.
which basically look at the sales of comparable brands or the anticipated future earnings of the brand in question.
So they're trying to get a more accurate picture of its true value.
Exactly.
But regardless of the method used, strengthening brand value is an ongoing process.
Right. It's not a one-time thing.
And it involves more than just advertising.
Like what?
Well, the quality of the product is crucial,
Okay.
as well as the packaging reliability.
Mhm.
Salespeople,
Right.
trade shows,
I mean-
social responsibility initiatives, and word of mouth.
So it's about creating a positive experience at every touch point.
Exactly.
And they specifically mentioned customer relationship management.
CRM,
Yeah, and database marketing
which are all about collecting and analyzing customer data.
to improve targeting and build relationships.
Right.
So it's about using data to create more personalized experiences.
Make customers feel valued.
Now let's talk about communication in general.
Okay.
I mean, it's more than just words.
Right.
Our sources point out that nonverbal cues play a huge role.
Like our body language,
Yeah.
our tone of voice, even silences.
And these nonverbal cues can completely change the meaning of what we say.
Absolutely.
Like if you say something sarcastic, but your tone of voice is serious.
People might misinterpret your message.
Exactly.
So it's important to be aware of both our verbal and nonverbal communication.
And one of the biggest challenges in communication is making assumptions.
Oh, yeah.
We think we know what someone means, but we could be totally wrong.
It's easy to jump to conclusions.
And our prior knowledge can actually make things worse.
How so?
Because we might rely on our past experiences instead of really listening to what the other person is saying.
So we're not really present in the conversation.
Exactly.
We're letting our assumptions cloud our judgment.
And to try to avoid these misunderstandings, companies are adopting integrated marketing communication.
Oh, what's that?
It's basically a holistic approach where all the different communication channels work together.
Okay.
Like advertising, public relations,
Ah.
promotions,
Ah.
market research.
So it's about having a unified message
Exactly.
and making sure everyone is on the same page.
But they point out that many companies still struggle with this.
It's not easy to do.
No, it requires a lot of coordination and collaboration.
And breaking down silos between departments.
Exactly.
So it's a challenge, but it's definitely worth it.
Now, what about when things go wrong?
Crisis communication.
Yeah. How do companies handle those unexpected events?
That can damage their reputation.
Exactly. And our sources emphasize the importance of planning ahead.
Proactive crisis management.
Right, because if you wait until a crisis hits,
It's too late.
you're already playing catch up.
And it's harder to control the narrative.
So crisis management is about having procedures in place to deal with those situations.
Before they happen.
And they distinguish between accidental crises,
Okay.
which are unavoidable.
Like a natural disaster.
Right, and other types where taking the right steps early on could prevent things from escalating.
So like a product recall.
Exactly.
If you handle it well.
You can minimize the damage.
And even turn it into a positive.
Now, social media has obviously become a huge part of communication.
Oh, yeah.
And our sources highlight the increasing use of images and videos.
It's more engaging than just text.
Definitely.
And it allows companies to connect with their audiences in new ways.
And platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Pinterest are becoming really popular for corporate communication.
Because they're so visual. And they allow companies to tell their story in a more creative way.
Now, to wrap things up, let's circle back to visual identity.
Okay.
Because that's the most tangible aspect of branding.
Yeah, it's what people see and remember.
And one source emphasizes that choosing those visual elements, like the brand name and logo, is a complex process.
There are a lot of factors to consider.
I mean, the brand name is especially important.
Because it's the foundation for everything else.
Right. It needs to be appropriate, easy to recognize, and memorable.
And it should evoke the right emotions.
Exactly.
And they also talk about brand image, which is the overall perception that people have of a company.
And that image is shaped by all sorts of things.
Like their experiences with the brand,
Okay.
what they've heard about it, the emotions it evokes.
And the associations they have with it.
So it's a very complex mental process.
And they break down those associations into different categories, like where they come from,
Yep.
what kind they are, whether they're positive or negative, how unique they are.
And how well they fit together.
And all of these factors influence how we feel about the brand.
And ultimately whether we choose to buy from them.
Now, effective corporate communication is all about building positive relationships with stakeholders,
Okay.
like customers, employees,
Okay.
investors,
Right.
and the community.
And it involves using all sorts of communication channels,
Right.
from traditional media to social media,
And it's about being transparent and authentic.
and building trust.
Exactly.
And they also mention the importance of image audits,
Which are basically a way to assess how a company is currently perceived.
and then develop strategies to improve their image if necessary.
And they outline the stages of image management.
Okay.
First, you analyze the current image.
Okay.
Then you develop proposals to achieve the desired image.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, you monitor the effectiveness of your actions.
So it's an ongoing process.
Now, in the world of entrepreneurship, brand building's a little different.
How so?
Well, it's often more personal. Okay.
Because the entrepreneur is the face of the brand,
Right.
and they need to be able to communicate their vision and passion.
And convince people to believe in them.
Exactly.
And they also need to be persistent.
Because it's not always easy.
No, it's a lot of hard work.
And they emphasize the importance of learning from failures.
Yeah, because you're going to make mistakes.
But it's how you bounce back that matters.
Exactly.
And they make an interesting point about selling an idea.
What's that?
They say that you need to make the buyer feel like they own it.
Oh, I see.
It's about giving them a sense of ownership.
Makes sense.
Now, in the service industry, brand positioning also involves things like managing demand,
Okay.
like finding ways to reduce demand during peak times
Okay.
and stimulate demand during off-peak times.
Through things like promotions.
Exactly.
And they also talk about focus strategies.
Which are?
It's about targeting specific customer segments
Okay.
instead of trying to appeal to everyone.
So it's about finding your niche.
And serving those customers exceptionally well.
And they also emphasize the importance of employees.
Yeah, because they're the ones who interact with customers.
Right.
And they can make or break the brand experience. And one thing they mentioned is the cycle of failure.
What's that?
It's basically what happens when employees are poorly trained and not well supported.
Okay.
It leads to poor service and high